So Kathy, we're letting people into the session, so we look forward to talking to you as people get moved in here.
Good to have people.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Learn a Latte. This is our Coffee and Conversation speaker series, and today we have Kathy Beatty, who is going to be talking about silver divorce. We know that divorce later in life after long-time marriages is on the rise, and so we wanted to bring in the expert on this. So Kathy is a mediator, a divorce counselor, an expert and author on the subject. So welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, so you and I, we were talking because you and I met about 15 years ago when I had gone through my divorce. And you were a counselor, and I was in like a group therapy session. You were the counselor, and you were so compassionate and so helpful, because when you're going through this, especially the first time, especially in later life. Now, mine wasn't a great divorce, but when you're going through this, it is so traumatic and it's so daunting and overwhelming that you really just don't know how to navigate this. So it was so helpful having you be a part of this. So I just thank you for the gift that you have and that you're helping others. So can you share, Kathy, a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you all for joining us today. I have been in the divorce work for the past 17 years. I am a domestic mediator, a divorce coach, and I also hold support groups, which is where I met Jennifer 15 years ago. So 2 years before that, I was beginning this process. Went through my own divorce because until you go through it, you will not get it. I don't care how many times you hear of someone going through divorce, but once you do, you certainly will get it. So my motto really is on a slide that I think Andrea is going to show on here. And my purpose is to help people get through this trauma with the least amount of damage. So there's some research, there's a lot of research that has been done on divorce in the later years. And 36% of the people going through divorce in the United States are over 50. And from 1990 to 2019, the divorce rate doubled, and it is projected to triple by 2030. Now, 39% of those, according to the National Center for Family and Marriage Research of Bowling Green State University, 46% of those are between the ages of 55 and 64. 39% of those are between the ages of 65 and 74, and 75 or older is 24% of marriages that are going through divorce. So this is, and so my role, whether that's in a group or divorce support or even in mediation, is to just minimize that damage, because you cannot go through a divorce without there being some damage. So it's going to happen. How do we minimize that? How do we shorten the turmoil and the process that you have to go through? And this is not a process that you go through alone. I don't want you to go through it alone. I offer free consultations. I give you the first hour for free, just to kind of get your bearings. And I want you to know that many people will say, I'm going to grab that attorney and we're going to start fighting. To do that, there are ways to work through this process to, again, minimize the damage and the trauma.
Kathy, what do you think is the biggest reason? When you hear the numbers, it's startling to hear how many people are going through a late life divorce or long time marriage divorce. What are the reasons? What do you think is the impetus for this?
Well, there are several reasons, according to research and according to my experience, and we're living longer. We're deciding that what we will not tolerate anymore. We're kind of tired of what has happened. Maybe we've put up with abuse or neglect for many, many years. And we're seeing that the stigma of divorce is lessening in our society. It's still tragic. I don't want to take away from that at all. It is a trauma. It has incredible implications to the community, to the grown children, which is a topic we could spend this whole 30 minutes speaking on, of the effects that it happens to our older children. And people think, well, they're grown, this isn't going to affect them. Oh, it does. It affects them tremendously. So the reasons are multi, and some people are just, I don't want to do this anymore, which is very sad and very tragic. But if you're the one who your spouse decides to leave, you are left with this experience that you have to get yourself through. And that's where I come in, is to help you. Now, I have people who were the ones to leave that I work with, and those who are left that I work with. So either way, you've got some trauma going on, and you need some experts and some guidance getting through this.
Yeah. So how do people make that decision to go through the divorce? And how do they
Well,
help themselves in that process of, like, where it's like, I guess I'm doing this, because it's a big, bold decision that you have to make mentally. So how do you help yourself in making that decision?
absolutely. Whether you're deciding to go through a divorce, and I work with a lot of people who are trying to make that decision, or if you are going through a divorce, you need someone to help you process through this. Again, don't go through this alone. It is important that you get your experts with you, that you sit down and look at what the cost is going to be. Of course, you never know, because you just don't know the effects, and you think, oh, this will be an amicable divorce. How many times have I heard that, Jennifer? Over the hundreds and hundreds of divorces that I worked with, it doesn't end up that way, because something happens to us when we go through divorce. We get desperate, or we get angry, or we want justice, or a number of things. So to help yourself in making this decision, you need perhaps a therapist, a pastor, a knowledgeable friend, not just any friend, a knowledgeable friend who's going to guide you through making this decision, and to have a plan in how to do this. So I also want to say that if you are going through divorce, I want you, in my group and in my coaching, we're going to deal directly with what's going on with you. We're going to deal direct. We're going to face the grief of divorce, the fear of divorce, the anger, the shame, which is huge, huge. Again, we could spend the whole 30 minutes just talking about the shame of divorce, the disappointment, the community effects that we feel are going to happen. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I don't want you, if you're going through this divorce, to hide, to deny, or to stuff what's going on with you. You have got to deal with this head on.
And that's how you can help yourself emotionally, right? Is not bearing those feelings, not minimizing it, because it is trauma, and it's a tragedy.
Absolutely. I put up in one of my slides I have in my group support is the definition of trauma, and divorce is it. Now, I've had people say, no, it's a crisis, it's not a trauma. And my thought is, you've never been through it. So you might not think it's a trauma until you go through it, and then you
Right.
realize it really is.
Right. So what are the biggest fears that people face, right? I think when I went through it, my biggest fear was, how am I going to support myself financially? How am I going to get through this? So the financial piece is a big fear. So can you talk about that one? And then what are some of the other fears that people experience?
Well, the financial fear of the unknown is absolutely a huge fear. How am I going to manage this? Maybe I've been a stay-at-home mom, or I've never worked, or a stay-at-home dad, or someone who's retired on a limited income. How am I going to do this? Well, there are ways to do that. And again, that's going to take some guidance in walking through those steps of the financial fear. It's the fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to end up when this divorce is final. So that certainly is the fear of the unknown. Also, I hear so many times, I don't want to die alone. I don't want to die alone. Well, do you want to die in a miserable marriage? I don't think so. I don't think so. And if you look at death as a spiritual journey, which it absolutely is, you think this is something between my creator and I to deal with. This is something I need to establish those around me who are going to be there for me. And hopefully that's your children if you have children, but you can develop that community. So fear of being alone, fear of finances, fear of being lonely. We think, oh, I'm going to be alone. Well, this is where the beauty, the rawness, the beauty in the rawness comes out, is you can step into this fear and you can begin to take the healthy risk of joining groups, of rediscovering who you were, who you are, what you love, because so many times that has been stuffed down and oppressed because we've spent so much time and energy on this negative relationship that we've forgotten who we are. And so this journey is true for if you're over 50, especially as who am I now? I'm afraid to know who I am. So instead of being afraid, I want you to turn that around into being curious. Who am I now? What is there out there for me? What are those passions that I once had that I loved? And I will tell you, when I work with people, sometimes we have to go back to high school and to college days of remembering what were those dreams that made us passionate, that allowed us to feel alive. And so once we get through this fear and we step out, we're going to face those fears. We're not going to deny them. We're not going to shrink back. And I will tell you a quote that I put up in my group that we talk about a lot is isolation is the most dangerous health issue that we have in this country. It's not diabetes, it's not heart disease, it's not cancer, it's isolation. It is detrimental to our health. So we have to be in charge of that. And instead of hiding in our fear, we have to step out and we have to make life happen.
Kathy, how is a gray divorce different than somebody, like in my situation, I was in my 30s when I got divorced. So how is a gray divorce different? How is it worse? How is it maybe better to go through a late life divorce? What are the differences?
Well, you have that ingrained history, right? And those routines that are wired in your brain. And so that's one of the things. Yes, if you were married 10 years, that's still true. But if you've been married 20, 30, 40 years, this has been your way of life. And so that's different than the being younger. But I want you to know that it does not diminish the fact that there's still hope after this and the rediscovery of who you are and finding your true passions again. So yes, it's different because the routines that are in our brain. And again, this is something that we're going to need to grieve. We're going to need to process through. We're going to need to articulate. And that's why group support is so vitally important, Jennifer, because when we get into a group and I hear someone sitting in the group articulate the pain and the feelings that I was going through that I could not put to words, all of a sudden it's normalized. And it's like, I'm not the only one. They feel this way too. And therefore, they're going to make it, and I can make it too. So it's just so important that we have that support. We don't isolate, that we join with people who can be of support to us.
So for the people who are just joining us, we're talking about gray divorce, and I want to offer that and invite you that if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we will try to get to your questions. And we got Kathy Beatty talking to us about gray divorce. So Kathy, we were talking about the financial aspect. What is the legal expense, and will it destroy a person's life savings?
And speaking of fear, that is certainly one. Is this going to destroy my life savings? It doesn't have to. It depends on how you approach this. If you go after fighting each other and you insist that you're going to punish the other person, you're going to take this all the way to court, and the only one who's going to benefit are your attorneys. So it really depends on how you handle this. I have many mediations that I conduct without attorneys. Now, there's a place for an attorney. I'm not throwing them out the window at all. I just want you to use them carefully. So when I have parties come together, they sit down, we work through this mediation agreement. I put it into a document, which is legally binding when it's signed. And then I say, okay, no, wait, I want you to take this document, this agreement, don't sign it, take it to your attorney, sit down with them and go through this so you understand the legal implications of your decisions. That is saving, I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars. I had one gentleman that I worked with in my group. He said, and I'm not saying this to fear, to frighten people, but he said, my legal fees are $129,000 and I'm not done yet. And I've had all of these. And so how can we, again, minimize that damage? And you're welcome to take that screen down if you'd like. But how do we minimize that damage financially? We approach this as two people making a business decision. And that's hard. That's hard to shift your mind to say, wait, this is a person I was intimate with for decades. And now we're going to this room, but it is where you are at. And if you can do that approach, you can help yourself through this. So go to your counselor to deal with the emotions. Go to your support group. Don't go to your attorney, or don't think that you're going to punish the other person. Come into mediation, work through these details. Let's divide these assets. Let's divide this retirement, because that's really in Michigan particularly, and states vary in their laws, but you're dividing this 50-50. Now you negotiate and you can move the puzzle pieces around, but you're going to negotiate a basic 50-50 split. Now, when you're older, you don't have the child support and the child custody. Typically, sometimes you do, but typically you don't have minor children to deal with. So it really is a business decision to face head on, to come in and just understand, okay, I'm gonna put my emotions over here with my therapist or my support group. I'm gonna talk with my experts. I'm going to talk with my financial people. I'm going to talk with my counselor. I'm going to talk with my pastor. But when it comes into that mediation room, I'm going to look at the numbers and I'm going to see what works for me and how can we negotiate through this. And if you will do that, you will save yourself thousands and thousands of dollars. And I also, Jennifer, I have folks in my mediations who, let's say there's 10 things on the agenda that we need to divide, and maybe only 7 of them we could come to an agreement on. Well, those 7 things, again, you're going to take that to your attorney, or perhaps you have your attorney with you in mediation. I do those all the time as well. And then you can make those decisions there on the spot. But if you have 7 items that you totally agree on, they're good, they're done. Out of the 10 items, there's only 3 items you have to go stand before a judge for. And the judge is going to say, okay, here's how I'm going to decide. And it may be, quite honestly, a way that neither one of you like. So it's a risk to go before a judge, but at least start in mediation. At least begin this process, trying to do the most of it that you can on your own.
Mediation can just be done in a way that, again, the attorneys don't make out, because they're the ones that essentially make out the best financially in this. And you can do it in a logical and, kind manner, right? Because I think what happens is this person that you love, that you committed your life to, all of a sudden becomes the enemy. And you're both holding your ground and you both want to not get screwed in the process, and you want to walk away with what seems fair to you. Now, what happens with the situation where the spouse threatens you and says you will get nothing and you are going to get no support, and all of a sudden it became this very vitriolic situation.
And I've had several people of that. I had one woman in my group who her husband threatened her and said, you'll be living under a bridge. You won't have any access to the kids. And it's like, well, that's not how divorce works. A divorce is based on laws, not on emotions and not on threats. So they're trying to intimidate you. And this person who once had authority and power in your life, you have to do that mind shift. You're right. They are no longer safe. And so again, that's where you need those people to walk alongside of you and say, no, this isn't right. And yes, the threats happen. And I just kind of scratch my head and think, I'm not sure where you're getting that from, buddy. It doesn't work that way. All marital property is marital property. And so it's going to be divided. And there's also the issue of spousal support that can be dealt with if you're married. Typically, more than 10 years, spousal support is a probability. So there's another area that you would look into. So, and you can negotiate this back and forth. Some people say, I don't want spousal support, but I want more equity in the home, or I want more of the retirement. So we can negotiate those things and get those worked through. And again, if there are those things, those 3 things out of 10 that need to go before a judge, so be it. It's so much better than taking 10 things to the judge.
Kathy, once that decision's been made, because it is a tough decision to make, once that decision has been made, what is the first thing that a person needs to do? And then what comes next? And what's the process that people go through?
We'll probably put up my second slide there about my workbook, because I think that is going to be relevant to this conversation. So this is a free download that I send out all of the time. All I need is your email address, and that would be the next slide, Andrea. All I need is your email address. It's a free download. It's about 44 pages, and you can find me. I'm pretty easy to find, Divorce Support Anonymous. There it is. It's a preparation guide. So this is going to tell you all of the things that you need to get together, all the W-2s that you need over the past few years, and all the retirement and an appraisal in the home, and all of this list of things that you need to get together. And this is going to help you, especially now when you're dealing with something that is overwhelming quite often. And it's going to help give you those steps. It's going to talk to you about what mediation is. It's going to talk to you about how to go into an attorney's office, what questions to ask your attorney. Because I found what happens is, so people are very distraught and they think, oh, I've got to get an attorney. And so they go into an attorney's office and they're going to spend the first hour telling the story of what happened, the betrayal, the pain, the anger, all of that. And then the next hour, the attorney's going to work with you and say, okay, these are the documents that we need to get together. So the average cost of an attorney is $350 an hour. So you just spent $700. What I want you to do, if you have to go through this process, is to be prepared, is to fill out this workbook, take it into your attorney's office, and say, now let's get to work. Here's all the documents that we need. And it is such a time saver. It also empowers you. It's like, I'm not walking in blind. And again, save your emotional discussion for your therapist or for your support group. Your attorney is too expensive to be using him as a counselor, him or her as a counselor. So the process, okay, so you've got this together. You're going to file for divorce. You can actually do this on your own. You can go into your county court website, and you're going to see a document on how to file for divorce. You're going to complete this document and you're going to submit it to the court. And once you do that, then the other party has to respond. He has a number of days to respond to that. And then this process is started. So the filing date is very important because it determines, it's kind of like the line in the sand. It determines where all the assets freeze. So we're going to look at those numbers. And if you are suspicious of your spouse spending a lot of marital money or wasting a lot of marital money, I remember one woman in my group who was in her late 60s, and her husband had spent all of their savings on gambling and other necessities, and she was devastated. So when you file for divorce, and quite honestly, many people need to file for divorce to protect themselves financially. So, but once you file for divorce, that line is drawn in the sand, and then you can begin this process. Once you file, you can go right into mediation if you want to, or if you want to go to an attorney's office and get him to walk through this process, you can. But again, I want to save you financial money. You can file on your own, and the documents are pretty self-explanatory. In Kent County, where we at, there's a legal assistance center that you can walk into, and you have questions on how to fill out this paperwork. They will guide you through that.
Do all
So
courthouses have a legal resource center where you can go and you can talk to people to get questions or get the right paperwork?
I believe so. I'm not positive because, in the whole country, I'm not positive, but I believe so. If not, there's an organization called Legal Aid or something similar. So you could just Google that and find out what organizations are available to you that might help you through this process.
We have a
Yeah.
question. Margaret had asked, who needs to be notified once a divorce is finalized?
Well, the court needs to be. So if you go to mediation and you get your agreement, then you can complete the judgment of divorce or have an attorney complete the judgment of divorce, and that would need to be submitted to the court. And then you would set a court date where you stand before the judge. Only the person who files has to stand before the judge. You can come as well if you're not the one who filed. But the court needs to register this, and the judge is going to ask you, have you lived in this county for 180 days, and a few other questions. Can this marriage be saved? And then your divorce is complete. So you've got the filing of the divorce, the mediation agreement, and the judgment of divorce to have this complete. Now, I know I'm dumping a lot of information. So if you have questions, you can certainly contact me or request my workbook to go through. But I'm hoping that this might educate you a little bit and empower you. So if you're going through this, you don't have to be as terrified as it.
Once the court date is completed and all the paperwork is finalized, then who needs to be notified? Do you have to go through, doesn't matter? You can just, it's all personal?
Yeah. Now, if you go to trial, then all of that information is public, which is another reason why you might want to go to mediation and get this resolved, because it is sanctioned by the court in mediation to be a confidential meeting. And so the only thing that comes out of there is going to be your agreement. So if you have some things to hash out as to, you spent all this money on gambling or whatever, and I want to be compensated for half of it, those are things that can be dealt with in mediation. If it goes to trial, then it is a public document.
What about with letting know insurance companies, whether it's Medicare or, work employer or Social Security? What about those?
Absolutely. So if you are employed, you need to let your employer know. You cannot maintain your ex-spouse on your insurance. That's insurance fraud. You would need to know Social Security if you're claiming on your spouse's or on yours Social Security. You would need to let them know. Yes, and your insurance. Yeah. So what are those relevant entities that need to know that you're now a single person and not. And then, let's talk about the house. If you are the one to assume the house, you do have to remortgage your home and get that person off of the mortgage. So the banks are going to need to know that information. And typically they won't let you remortgage until you have the divorce and they see the divorce document, the judgment of divorce.
Kathy, is any of this outlined somewhere so that once a person goes through this process that they know where to make, these adjustments? So is that part of like your guide that you have, or is there a website that people can get this information?
I do not have that in my workbook. It's a really good idea to have it in the workbook. But I don't know of a resource that's going to tell you that. Typically, once you get all of this completed, I think it's going to be just a natural process to, okay, insurance and mortgage company and refinancing the home and Social Security, those things come up. But you're not on a deadline that, if you don't let me know in 30 days, then you're in deep trouble, other than carrying on your spouse on your insurance, because that is considered insurance fraud.
All right, and we'll put up the last slide. Kathy, as we wrap up, because we're about out of time, we could talk for hours about this, right? We've just scratched the surface, and it is such a daunting subject and overwhelming and difficult to navigate. So as we wrap up, what is like the hope that you want people to walk away with?
Thank you, Jennifer. What a great question. I want them to walk away with hope, because so many people feel like this is the end of my life. I'm being destroyed. I'm being split in half. It is not. I have worked with so many people in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s who can rediscover and do rediscover who they are. They find a volunteer. They find a place to volunteer. They find more meaning in their life. So I want you to know that there's hope, and that this is not the end of your story. It's a very messy transition that you need to be intentional about as you go through this process. That I'm going to heal. This is not the end of the story. That was my motto. It's not going to end this way. I am going to be intentional about my healing, and I am going to move forward with my life, whatever days are remaining. So the next slide is going to talk about, those are some of my resources that are available to you. 30 Days of Healing After Divorce. I've been just getting a lot of great reviews on that, because it is simple. You are in trauma, and so your brain is not functioning fully right now. So if you can take just one day at a time, there's 2 pages there, a couple of questions, a couple of thoughts to work through to help you get through this trauma and to start your healing, because you need to be working on your healing right now. So I want you to have hope. I want you to know that there's life beyond divorce. I don't care if you're 75 listening to this or 80, there's hope beyond divorce, and you can make that happen.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And you and I were talking ahead of time, and you mentioned that on your YouTube channel, the #1 video that people watch is what?
My most watched YouTube, and I think it's up to like 12,000 right now, is How Does Mediation Work? And the second one is Silver Divorce, or I think it's named Being Married 20 Years or More. That's my second one. So this is a topic that a lot of people are considering, researching. Don't go through this alone. Get someone who's going to guide you through these steps, and deal with what you have to deal with, and live honestly, because you don't want regrets at the end and say, you know, I was in misery the last 20 years of my life and I never did anything about it because I was afraid. So connect with me if I can be of help.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy. You're so informative, you're so compassionate, and we just really appreciate your expertise in this area. I'm Jennifer Firestein, Associate State Director for AARP Michigan, and this is our Learn a Latte series where we bring in experts and have conversation over a cup of coffee. So we invite you to check out all of the upcoming things that we're doing with AARP Michigan by going to aarp.org/mi. You can also find us on Facebook, where we list all of the events that we have coming up. So Kathy, again, thank you so much. And to all of you, our viewers, we wish you well in this journey. If you're contemplating it, you're in the process of it, we wish you well, and know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you, and have a great day.